I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
In over 200 years, the United States of America has seen its executive branch of government under the control of but 44 men. These men saw the country through times of war and peace, through times of reconstruction and stability, and through times of hardship and prosperity. Each man who has taken the presidential oath has had a plethora of difficult responsibilities before him. Often a divisive political figure, the president must pass or veto United States laws, nominate federal judges, like those who serve on the Supreme Court, and act as Commander-in-Chief of the United States Armed Forces. Who were these great men? How has their leadership shaped the country, government, and way of life we now know today? And what does the future hold for the office of the President of the United States of America? Join us as we examine the lives, service, and influence of the United States presidents, from politics to power. George Washington not only has the distinction of being America's first president, he is also the first leader in history to achieve victory in a revolution against a colonial empire. Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army during the American Revolution, his strategy as a general won the Americans many victories over the Redcoats, such as the operations that took place in Trenton, New Jersey in December of 1776 and January of 1777. Washington and his men famously crossed the icy Delaware River 3 times. Once into Trenton to defeat the British under Johann Rall, then back to Pennsylvania, carrying prisoners and supplies captured during the surprise attack, and finally, once more, under the iciest conditions yet, to defeat British reinforcements commanded by Lord Cornwallis at Princeton, sending the Redcoats into retreat. His strategy also led the Continental Army to victory at Saratoga in 1777 and Yorktown in 1781, 2 decisive victories for the Americans. While Washington had a preternatural sense of leadership, judge of character in selecting generals, and a strong gift for strategy, the general was a humble man who only served in the Revolution at the insistence of his peers in the Second Continental Congress. Indeed, George Washington only served his country because he felt it was his duty, not for any political or personal betterment. As Washington writes to his wife with the news of his appointment before the Revolution,
"You may believe me when I assure you in the most solemn manner that so far from seeking this appointment, I have used every endeavor in my power to avoid it, not only from my unwillingness to part with you and the family, but from a consciousness of its being a trust too great for my capacity."
The humble but great general seemed a natural choice for the office of president when the newly minted United States Constitution created the office, along with the other 2 branches of government in 1787. He would serve in the office from April 30th, 1789 through March 4th, 1797, choosing not to seek a 3rd term and establishing the two-term custom. The Electoral College, also established by the famous document, unanimously elected Washington to the presidency, with the next highest vote count making John Adams vice president. Initially declining the $25,000 a year salary voted upon by the first United States Congress, Washington was later convinced to accept the pay to avoid establishing a precedent of only the independently wealthy holding the office. Washington's humility shaped the office, and he took great care to mold any ceremony the presidency might bring into something that would be uniquely American and not something that might resemble the royal courts of Europe. Many in the Congress wanted to address the president as Your Excellency or other fanciful titles, but Washington chose to simply be addressed as Mr. President. Called the father of his country, even in his own lifetime, Washington also managed to serve as president in ways that few, if any others, have. One of only two sitting presidents to lead an army on the field of battle, Washington led a militia of 13,000 men to quell an insurrection known as the Whiskey Rebellion, when belligerents protesting a whiskey tax wreaked havoc in Pennsylvania in 1794. Washington was also the only prominent founding father to leave instructions in his will for all of his slaves to be freed. While Washington personally opposed slavery, the president never challenged the issue for fear of dividing the nation that was in its mere infancy. He wrote,
There is not a man living who wishes more sincerely than I do to see a plan adopted for the abolition of slavery.
Retiring to his plantation at Mount Vernon, Virginia, after his presidency, Washington died on Saturday, December 14, 1799, at age 67. His last words were reported to be, "'Tis well." By Washington's side as vice president for both of his terms was a lawyer, statesman, and diplomat, John Adams. As one of the founding fathers of our nation, Adams was instrumental in convincing the First Continental Congress to declare independence from Great Britain and helped Thomas Jefferson draft the Declaration of Independence in 1776. A fierce and vocal opponent of the Stamp Act of 1765, which said that no printed material could be printed in the colonies unless it was on imported British stamped paper, was imposed upon the colonists without consulting American legislators. In December of that year, Adams delivered a speech in Massachusetts that declared the act invalid, since the people of Massachusetts had no representation in British Parliament. In 1770, in Boston, an altercation between colonists and British soldiers resulted in the death of 5 civilians. The incident came to be known as the Boston Massacre, and while the tragedy was yet another sign that America should push towards independence, when Adams was called upon to defend the soldiers in court, he accepted, in spite of what it might do for his reputation. At the trial, Adams made a now famous statement, ensuring the soldiers received a fair trial based on the facts and evidence available.
It is more important that innocence be protected than it is that guilt be punished. For guilt and crimes are so frequent in this world that they cannot all be punished.
After the Revolution, Adams served abroad as a diplomat, negotiating the peace treaty with Great Britain and securing vital loans from bankers in Amsterdam. In the election of 1788 through 89, the electors in the Electoral College were each permitted to cast 2 votes. All of the 69 electors cast 1 vote each for Washington. In second place, with 34 votes, came John Adams. Presiding over the Senate during his tenure as vice president, John Adams cast a record 29 tie-breaking votes. But otherwise, Adams found the office frustrating and dull. Washington, while a collaborative leader, rarely consulted Adams on matters of policy or administration. John famously wrote to his wife, Abigail,
"My country has, in its wisdom, contrived for me the most insignificant office that ever the invention of man contrived or his imagination conceived."
When elected president in 1797, Adams continued with all of the major programs and policies set forth by Washington. He even retained the same cabinet members, although Adams often made decisions without consulting them, and indeed, even making decisions in opposition to the cabinet's advice. While John Adams' independent-mindedness often met with criticism, the prickly leader, as he was called, had a talent for making the right decisions among sometimes universal opposition. It is thought that Adams' stance on making peace with the French, rather than continued hostilities as a result of the Quasi-War and the conflict between France and Britain, is what lost him the election for what would have been his second term in 1801. Though it was thought that Adams bore ill will towards Jefferson for defeating him in his second bid for the presidency, Adams' correspondence with his fellow founding father suggested otherwise. In fact, when Adams died on July 4th, 1826, 50 years after the adoption of the Declaration of Independence, John Adams' last words were, "Thomas Jefferson survives."
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.